You're listening to Coach Mike on the mic. Let's talk hoops. A podcast that brings hoop fans together and their stories to life. Coach Michael Herrera is a Texas high school basketball coach with 3 state Final Four appearances and a lifelong fan of the game. He'll sit down with coaches, players, and fans to share stories, game perspectives, X's and O's, and lessons learned along the way. Now, let's talk hoops.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Today I had the pleasure of sitting down with Misha Clark and Crystal Lucero, both coaches' wives of Rodney Clark from Wagner and Robert Lucero from Austin Westlake. This episode was all about how critical and important our spouses are to us in the world of coaching. Oftentimes, the accolades should go to the spouses out there, both male and female, for the support they provide as spouses both on and off the court. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Coach Mike on the Mic. Let's talk hoops. Well, let me start by just thanking both of you for taking time out of your afternoon and sitting down to talk with me on this basketball podcast. Behind every coach, there's even a greater woman. And it's in my opinion that we cannot do what we have a passion for without women like you on our sides. And I know that oftentimes with podcasts or whatever, the light gets shined on the coach, and oftentimes the wife is kind of like in the shadows. But the point in me doing this episode is to really bring light to the fact what you guys have to do and what my wife has to do day in and day out as a coach's wife. So Misha and Crystal, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of this basketball podcast called Coach Mike on the Mic. Let's talk hoops. So thank y'all.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, you bet.
And now it's time for Layup Lines.
You bet. So at the very beginning of my podcast, I always like to start by doing a warm-up. And this warm-up is called Layup Lines. You guys are very familiar, right? You go to the basketball game, both teams are warming up on the opposite sides, and that's just kind of get a feel for the environment, a feel for the game, and that's kind of what I like to do too as well. So I'm going to start off by asking you guys some questions, and then when I am done, if you guys will figure out who wants to go first, you guys will bounce off and ask me some questions as well. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Misha, first question for you. If you could go back in time and high-five yourself for something that you did, what would you go back in time and high-five yourself for?
Basketball related or anything?
No. This doesn't have to be about basketball.
I'm going to choose basketball related since that's the theme. I would say holding it together as Coach Clark's wife, because to know him is to love him. So I would say all together, just holding it together, because it's not easy out there when you see him spark off and you want to spark off.
And we're going to go there later in the podcast. Trust me.
Okay.
We're going to go there. So, all right, Crystal, what about you? If you were to high-five yourself, what would you go back and high-five yourself for?
High-five myself, I guess. Misha can protest this. Having a baby in the middle of basketball season. I think y'all broke our hearts, Coach, when I was home listening on the radio. Misha and I have already talked about when Coach Clark and Wagner, they broke our hearts. But I think having a kid during basketball season and Robert not missing anything, so he missed no practice or games. So I think that's, a good thing to high-five myself for.
All right. So, Misha, obviously, we all know that people that know you are pregnant and you're expected to have your baby when again?
I'm due in 2 weeks.
You're due in 2 weeks. All right. So this question is about that. And first of all, I pray that everything goes smoothly.
Thank you.
But what is one thing during this pregnancy that might be different than your last? So like any kind of weird cravings or anything different this time around?
It is very different it's a different pregnancy altogether. My daughter was very calm, was a very easy pregnancy. I didn't even feel pregnant. Like I would have to remind myself, this one, I don't know if it's a combination of because it's Rodney's son or it's because it's a boy. This has been just a very difficult pregnancy, just all together. He's just very big and it's been very draining. And then of course with coronavirus, it all together has just been a really emotionally draining and physically draining pregnancy. So,
well, as cliche as this might sound, hang in there. You got this and you'll do fine. And we're all praying for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Crystal, what about you? Any kind of weird things that happened? It's your son, correct? That's your youngest?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So with your son,
yeah, this
is there
is
anything that you had going on that was different or any kind of weird cravings during that pregnancy?
Well, it was my first pregnancy, and I hate to say easy. So it's funny that you're saying with the boys, I heard girls were harder than boys, but I worked out. I had him on Thursday. I worked out Monday. I went to a basketball game Monday. And if the doctor wouldn't have put me in the hospital, I was telling Misha this earlier, I would have gone to all of Robert's basketball games for district. I would have gotten my eyebrows done. I would have gotten my nails done, but I got put in before. So it was awesome. I think, so I had cancer, so I didn't know if I could have kids. And so I think that every little bump and bruise or, anything through the pregnancy, I kind of was happy about, I guess, and never really complained.
Well, that's amazing. God is good for sure.
For sure.
Question number 3, Misha, what's one superstition or routine that your husband has on game day? If you don't know, you don't know, but I just thought I'd ask.
He has a couple. He's not superstitious whatsoever.
But very routine?
Yes, very routine. He's not superstitious. He
Okay.
does not believe in that. But one thing I do notice that he does is, and this is cliche, I know it's going to be a good game or they're going to have a good game when his nerves are going crazy. And you would think, okay, that would be a bad thing. He's nervous. But no, the more nervous he is, and when he gets butterflies and I get that text from him a couple hours earlier, he's like, okay, I'm getting the butterflies, I know, okay, like he's been around the boys, they're mentally focused in, this is going to be good. So it's a routine. I always, and if I don't get that text saying I have butterflies, I'm like, okay, now I'm scared. So what's going on?
All right. Crystal, what about you for Robert?
So Robert is very particular. So he has his, he wears like a little button. So now that our son had heart surgery, so he wears a little heart and then he wears a little breast cancer ribbon. And some days maybe he forgot it or something. And I have to bring it up to the school to make sure he has it on his lapel whenever he coaches. But he definitely, I'm sure there's other stuff that I have no idea. And I don't know if I really want to know that he goes through, but he definitely is a particular kind of guy. So I'm sure he has his whole thing that we don't even want to know about.
All right. This one's a little bit easier, hopefully. Misha, last book that you read?
Coach Rutledge's, or Clint Rutledge. I said Coach Rutledge. Clint Rutledge's book was
Okay.
the last one that I read. My mom gave both Rodney and I a copy of it.
Okay.
So.
Awesome. Krista, what about you?
So I'm looking at I'm actually been listening to books. Probably my last favorite book was Michelle Obama's book, Becoming. And I think listening to her read it was pretty amazing, just hearing her voice and hearing the stories and how she's still becoming. And, you think of her as already there. And so I think that was one that kind of hit me hard. But I actually downloaded the library app, so I have a few going. I'm in the middle of White Fragility and all kind of doing a lot of race related books, reading and learning. And so it's opening my eyes to a lot of things that, as a Black woman, I was kind of blind to also. So that's kind of my new starting to get into that stuff too.
A couple of things on that. You mentioned the title Becoming. I really like what you said. That was really well said. Because I would think the same, right?
Yeah.
But I think we all kind of evolve throughout life. But I did over the summer, I read White Fragility as well.
Mhm.
Obviously in education and in sports, I mean, come on, like we deal with all walks of life and all races in the game of basketball and education, that we all have to do our parts to be educated and to be able to understand everybody. So how far along are you in that book?
So I'm probably at like chapter 4.
Okay.
But the history part of it was really interesting. I was actually listening to it, and then I bought it because I was like, I need to highlight. I need to go back and do my own research after listening to some of the things, and just like the history of like even why race became a thing. So that I definitely just bought the hard copy so that I could, listening to it's great, but then you want to refer back to things.
I'm not gonna lie, my hair on my arms, which I don't have a lot of it, are just like standing up right now, because it's one of those things. When I was reading the book, like I had to like change highlighters because I was highlighting so much, But just my recommendation while you read that book is don't be afraid to challenge some of the ways that even she thinks too, because there were some things that came up and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about what you just said there. But I think a lot of times, and I know I'm digressing here, is that when you read something, it's not an absolute, right? It's an idea, it's a concept, and it makes you think. And it's okay to challenge things, right? But it's the way that we do it. So I'm glad you're reading that book.
And it's funny when you say that too, because it's making me like start to think of what's my own opinion about it. And,
right.
One other book, hard copy, I bought, is again, I started listening to it, is the history of African-American women in the U.S. So, you never really hear about the history of us as Black women. So, and I'm pretty sure I butchered the name of that book, but it's basically a history book. So again, started listening to it, and then I was like, nope, need a hard copy. So I'm just got it in the Amazon. So I'm going to get on that. I'll let you know.
All right. Let me know. All right. Last question I have is, so what movie are you most likely to pick? One to make you cry, one to make you laugh, or one to make you feel motivated, Misha?
Ooh. Probably for me right now, laugh. Probably right now. But if it was normal situation, probably motivated.
Motivated. All right. Crystal?
So are you asking the type of movie? Like my all-time favorite, I like to laugh, but my all-time favorite movie would be like Coming to America is my all-time favorite. I could watch it anytime it's on TV. I have the VHS, the DVD. So
now aren't they coming out with that movie, right? They're remaking that, right?
Yeah, second one. So I'm not sure, Misha, do you know when it's coming out? I haven't seen.
Soon. I think it's soon. I want to say, is it October?
I hope so.
I think it's supposed to be, October. I think. Don't hold me to that. Rodney's like the movie buff. Anytime, really, to be honest, I watch movies is with him, because it's very difficult for me to sit down.
Well, this is a good time for all of us to have a laugh, right? So I would probably go with that as well. All right, so those are my 5 questions for you guys. Y'all go ahead and shoot away and question me.
I'll let you start, Misha.
Okay. I'm deep. So, and I'm gonna warn y'all right now, I'm gonna try not to cry on this podcast. So I'm just warning y'all, I'm super hormonal. What I just want to know, because in talking with you, Coach, like just since day one, I feel like we've clicked, but I don't know really where you transitioned, decided that you wanted to be a coach. Was there like a pivotal moment, or was it something just growing up as a kid, like that you said, okay, when I get older, or was it sports? What was it that just changed everything and you decided you wanted to go on that path?
So like all kids, right? We all want to go play in the NBA, but you quickly realize that that's not going to happen, right? So for me, I still wanted to be in the NBA. I wanted to be a team physician. That was my ultimate goal. So like even here at Steele High School, I teach all the medical classes because that's my passion. I love medicine. I love healthcare. I used to work in cardiology for 2 years prior to becoming a teacher. And so like, that's my passion. That's what I love. I love health science and I love medical classes. But it was probably somewhere, I was a walk-on basketball player at the University of Tulsa. never got recruited to play basketball because I just wasn't good enough, and I think that's a hard thing for kids to realize is sometimes, you're just not as good as some of those other players, but I accepted it. By my senior year, I mean, I'm good with it. I want to go focus on academics, participate in intramurals or whatever, but I still wanted to be a part of a team. Like I missed that part. So I tried out every year at the University of Tulsa. My sophomore year, the school just missed a Final Four to get into the Final Four, and they lost to North Carolina by 4 points. So this is like the school I was at. So that's the caliber small D1 school. They were the second winningest program behind Duke. But my junior year, I ended up walking on. I ended up making the team there. And just watching and observing collegiate basketball coaching staffs and how they worked and how they coached and how they managed time and then how they built relationships with kids. And then I took a class called Coaching 101. Then I graduated. I went to Texas Tech and did my master's there and actually got to teach basketball. So I was a personal fitness and wellness instructor, and which is a crazy story. It's kind of how I met my wife. But I started teaching basketball. And so when I started teaching basketball to college kids that were taking it as a PE class, man, I just loved it. And started coaching AAU after when I was working in the medical field. And then I don't know if you know this, but in order to teach healthcare classes, you have to have 2 years of medical experience. So I kind of worked for 2 years in the medical field so that I could become a teacher now that I can become a coach. Because I kind of realized I wanted to coach, but I was like, what am I going to teach? So that's kind of what kind of led me into coaching. Yeah.
And that was going to be, you led into my question about how you met your wife.
Hopefully none of my students will listen to this. But truth be told, the secret's out of the bag here. So my wife was a collegiate volleyball player. She played at Texas Tech, and she was in one of my diet and exercise classes. And so it was kind of, I mean, I was a grad assistant, right? And you were like, you had like the devil and the angel on your shoulders, right? Like, should I or should I not? Should I or should I not? But they said, you can date. It's fine. It's okay. You're not a professor, And so I actually met her at Texas Tech. She played volleyball, and I actually played a lot of volleyball as well. And so we started playing volleyball together on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the rec center. And we were engaged 6 months after that. We were married 6 months after that. And we've been married. Yeah, we've been married for almost 16 years now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. As a grad assistant, though, you're close enough in age.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she's only 3 years younger than me.
Yeah. So it's
not like us, Misha.
Yeah. So
like me, Rodney.
I grew up in a very disciplined household. I grew up Catholic in the Catholic schools.
Okay.
And so I'm a rule follower by nature. Okay. So when they have that conversation with us that it's okay for you to date, but it's kind of frowned upon, right? So I had those friends literally on both one of my shoulders, right? And I was having these internal battles, but I waited until she took her final.
But obviously it gotten far enough where 6 months later you knew.
So we actually like anytime we would go out together, it would be in a group setting. Just because I didn't want to have to answer those questions, and so we went out as a group. And then so when she took her final, sent her some roses and said, matter of fact, this is a true statement. I said, now that we can, we will.
Oh.
And that's actually kind of how I proposed to her as well.
Not cry.
I know. I was going to say, Misha's going to cry over there.
I'm sorry.
Well, Rodney was definitely not that romantic.
So who's more competitive between the two of you? And what's your wife's name?
My wife's name is Courtney.
Between you and Courtney, Coach, which one?
Oh man, like we're both perfectionists in our own like ways, but the competitiveness, I'd have to say me. I'm just a very strong-willed, like I have to get things right. I have to win at all costs, and I just you guys know this, like from a coach's perspective, like you take those losses personal, right? And you have to fix something, like something was wrong. What was that thing that was wrong? So I'd have to say me for sure. She's the softer spoken one.
Okay. So my next question, you almost got there, was has there ever been a moment that you were like, I can't do this? Like this is just, it's too much, or something bad happened, or you felt like you weren't, it just wasn't your calling anymore?
No, in the game of basketball, absolutely not. But we have those internal battles with ourselves when we do lose. You know what? My JV year last year was awful. I mean, it was not good. We did not win for like an entire month and a half. And as a coach, again, you take those things personal, like what is it about it? And then you fix it and you mold it, and you know that you're making strides. So during that time, it was rough for me, because you start second guessing, like, is it me? Like, is it my fault? Like, what am I not a good coach anymore? Am I not reaching these kids anymore? And you do your best to get over that as fast as you can. But, and we completely turned our season around, and then we were like 11-3. And built them into where they started believing in themselves. And so what that did for me, I internalized that as, it's okay. Like, you're not going to win all the time, right? But it's about growth. And so, no, I've never questioned whether or not I need to get out. And I pray to God that that doesn't happen, because I want to retire as a coach. So no, I haven't done that, but I definitely have internal battles for sure, like all coaches probably do.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Are we
want to go again?
Yeah, I think this is the last one, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Do you want me to go, Crystal, or you?
Yeah, go ahead if you have one.
I was just going to ask how the dynamic, and Crystal and I had talked about this one, just how the dynamic is between your wife and you, and how does she handle the coaching, because not everybody probably comes from me growing up a coach's kid. So like, I understood, and it is, you know, for somebody else to come into it, I think the statistics like on coaches and successful marriages is extremely low, sadly. How did she do with it? Because it's a totally different lifestyle.
You know, I'm very blessed to have that question asked, because that's precisely why I brought you guys both on this episode, because these are conversations that male and female coaches need to have about the spousal relationship in the world of coaching. And for me, you know, it's not easy. It's not easy for Courtney. It's very difficult raising two children at times where she feels like she's completely by herself. And I feel helpless, because by the time I get home, she's asleep and the kids are asleep. And then we've got practice at 6:45 in the morning. So I'm up before the kids are up. And then I've got practice. And so I might see my kid for an hour within 2 days, let alone my spouse, who's now asleep in bed when I get home because she's so exhausted from taking care of the kids. You know, she does her best, but I know you guys know firsthand what that's like, that, you know, at times she feels like she's alone, you know, that I'm not present. And that doesn't make it easy for me, because it's like, it's not that I don't want to be there to be with her and for her. It's just that I'm following my calling in coaching, you know. But what makes it all worth it in the end is when I see her at the occasional game. And I know, Crystal, I don't see you often because you're in Austin, but I see Misha at absolutely everything. And I internalize that. Like, I'm just like, man, that is amazing how supportive you are of your husband. And we're going to get to this in a little bit about your childhood. And I did not know that you came from a coach family, but so I take the times that my wife does come with the kids as such a quality time that I get, and I don't get to interact because I'm coaching, but to know that I've got my wife and my two kids behind me in the stands, that means the world to me, versus maybe like you, Misha, where I see you at every single solitary thing where you have a lot of quantity and quality. I really, really love it when I can look at the quality that I have in that game or that moment when I know my wife is there. So yeah, for sure. Good questions for sure. But this episode is not about me. It's about you guys. So I'm going to start off. Crystal, we'll start off with you and just kind of keep things simple for right now. So I just want to talk about like your childhood. Where did you grow up? What was your family dynamic like? So kind of touch on that a little bit.
So I was born in East Texas in Lufkin, and I moved to Katy when I was 8. And so I played basketball, softball, ran track, volleyball, all like through high school. And And like you mentioned earlier, I definitely thought, I think the WNBA started when I was in like junior high or high school. I definitely thought I was going to be a WNBA player, but I, grew to 5'2", and I was a little scrappy player, but never, good enough to play at the next level. So I was always, my parents were very supportive. My dad ran track in college, so they were always at like all of my events and all of my things that I was going to. I graduated in 2001 from May Creek High School in Katy, Texas. Went to Stephen F. Austin, and that's where I met Rob. I did intramurals there, and actually I used to referee basketball, and so that's how I met Robert, is through refereeing basketball when I was in college, and he was at Nacogdoches High. So I never, kind of similar, like I always wanted to be around the sport. I'm actually an interior designer, and so I do commercial interior design and work on healthcare and higher ed. Actually, Baylor Scott & White's one of our big clients, and we do a lot of stuff at UTSA in San Antonio and UT. But I was that girl who was like in the interior design and all the, decorative kind of stuff, and then also going to the intramural fields to play flag football and, basketball and everything. And again, refereeing basketball in the chapter, in the chapter there. So that's how I met Rob. And we're 7 years apart. He likes to say 6, but it's 7, solid 7. He was definitely graduated high school in the 90s. And so we've been married since 2007. So I think that's 13 years this past summer. I think basketball, I always laugh. I mentioned earlier about me having breast cancer. So I was 27 when I got diagnosed. We had been married 4 years at the time, and he was at Westlake as an assistant that year. And I literally went to get a test done and like went straight to a basketball game, and found out it was a tournament. I think it was in Manor. And found out I had breast cancer. And since it was a tournament, I went to the next day to the tournament and obviously knew I had cancer. And his JV players and the varsity players, they all had written my name on their shoes. So in the community there was amazing to us. So basketball has been, highs and lows, has been involved in our lives. And it's what brought us together, even though neither of us are at, played at a high level. We both were kind of brought together from the sport. So that's why I love basketball.
I like how you just said that, because that's part of this game is, and I'll have a question for you later about that, but it brings another family to your own family dynamic.
Sure.
when you know that not only do you have the support of your husband, you have the support of your children, but now you have a support of a community and players, right? So it kind of builds that whole community support that we all need to have. So I'm glad that
they definitely were my babies before Bo. I had a lot of big 6'8" babies before Bo came along.
Yeah, I don't know what they feed people out there, but y'all always have a 6'8" something or a 7 foot something. I just need to figure out what y'all are feeding them.
We're not eating.
Misha, what about you? Where did you grow up? What was your childhood like?
I grew up here in San Antonio. I grew up out in the Helotes area. So I was born and raised a coach's kid. Like you said, you didn't know. My dad was a head coach at Judson my whole life growing up. He started at Judson in 85, and I was born in 85. So I grew up 2-parent household. Of course, same thing as I see going on now. My dad was gone all the time. He was football and head track coach. So he did secondary and specialty teams in football. So he was gone all the time. I mean, if you know, those seasons literally are back to back. You've got football, and Judson, of course, always went to the end of December to state, and then track started in January and ran all the way through May. So I pretty much was accustomed to the life. I went to O'Connor High School, graduated from O'Connor in 2004, and then went to UTSA. So I've stayed here my entire life and started working while I was in college in financial sales, and just been doing accounting since. I recently, in the last year, we thought our daughter Rylan, she just turned 3, was going to be our only one. She was my 5th pregnancy, so we had to go through a lot of fertility to have her. And so we thought she was going to be our only one. And I just felt between his schedule and mine that I was basically paying somebody else to raise my child. And it was a lot. It was getting off of work from one side of town, running to daycare, changing her, putting her in all her Wagner clothes 2 times a week, running to games, an away game or a home game. And, you know, it was a 3-hour commute round trip. And I was just like, I need to, and I never thought I'd be a stay-at-home mom ever. And it was emotionally probably the hardest thing I would say I probably have ever done. And then surprise, Rodney dropped the ball on me that he wanted another one. And I was like, well, okay. So then we had this one, but just rewinding back, I met him 10 years ago, and it was at one of my dad's track meets. And he says he paid attention. I didn't pay attention to him. I can't remember him. But he was sitting behind me with Coach Bruce, Robert Bruce. And he asked who that was, and they said, oh, that's Coach Fott's daughter. And I think he said something along the lines of, I'm going to meet her, I'm going to date her or something. And then I ran into him again. Another coach was having a party at Midnight Rodeo, and I was there with my dad and my stepmother and I met him there again. And then
They always know before us, Misha. That's Robert always says that he knew I was going to be something in his life. They always know before us. But they're a lot older.
This. From the moment I met him the first date, and it sounds so cliche, I knew he was the one. Like, I had a complete and utter checklist. It was very difficult for me to ever like let go or find somebody like I liked. I knew exactly who I wanted to be with and what I wanted to be with. And from the time I was a little girl, I said, I'm going to marry a coach. Like, I idolized my father. Like, to be a coach's kid, it's like the most amazing childhood experience like you could just ever imagine. Like, as a little girl, you're so proud of your dad. I don't want to cry.
You're going to make me cry.
In like a way you just don't understand. And I want that so bad for my daughter, and she already is. That's why I think, and my mom did an amazing job of that, making sure we were at every game, you know, the bows, the outfits, and you're proud of your dad. And so I think that has been my driving force. I know you said earlier that you see me everywhere. That just, to have her have the childhood that I have is just the most important thing in the world to me.
You know, my circle of influencers as a coach, you know, are kind of in this area, right? Like your husband and the coaches that, you know, you coach against every single year in district and whatnot. And I've always seen that about you, but, you know, through this podcast, that's why I learned the story behind you. Like, what makes you tick? Why are you present? And it's because of what you grew up looking at. And you're just, you know, modeling that behavior that you were used to from your mother, supporting your dad. So that's awesome. And now I know where that comes from. But I will tell you this, you might be a stay-at-home mom now. When you were saying that, in my head, I was saying, but Crystal is reading a book called Becoming. Like, you ain't done yet, girl. Like, you can, you know, you don't know where life's going to take you after this, right? So
definitely back to work.
Back to work?
Yes.
Same field?
Yeah, I was an accountant. So
Okay.
Yeah, same field. I'm going to go back. I've been in it for so long, but yeah, I do. I need to have that. I don't like saying me time because I wouldn't trade it. Like, it's been an amazing experience being home with her, but I need that feeling accomplished. And also I need to feel like I'm doing my part as a wife, because and this is just personal, how I feel, even though I make sure I'm at every game and doing all this, I was doing that while I was working. I want to feel like I'm still contributing to the home. And I just feel like Rodney has enough stressors. It's a very difficult career. So I definitely don't, if I can go to work and I'm successful at work and I have that income, I need to do that. That's just my part. It's very difficult for me to just stay at home.
I think that all coaches' wives can identify with that for sure, with what you just said. Go ahead, Crystal. You were about to say.
Oh, no, I was going to say she tried it. Like you said, the becoming part. Like, I think that's amazing that you even took that time to say,
It
you
was
know what,
hard.
let's see, let's see how this is going to go. And now, and you can do it again.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that me time is so important. And, as a husband and as a coach, we don't have all the answers, even to marriage. I don't think anybody does, right? So we have to learn, and we have to, just listen to and have conversations with other people. For me, obviously talking to other men, how are you handling the situations with your spouses? And we all kind of learn from each other. But through all of this, and even with COVID and this pandemic and then racial tensions and all this kind of stuff, you have to have me time, and everybody takes me time differently. And so for my wife, she goes out and she'll go run. We're both marathoners. So she'll go out and, she ran 10 miles this morning. And so that's her time, even though she's working. So I know for you, you might not drive 10 miles right now because you got to be careful. But the point is that I understand what you're saying. You need to have that me time to have that sense of accomplishment, and that you're doing something for you, because it's a rough world out there for you to just be home all day with the kids. Trust me, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine what it's like, doing that. And when my wife does it, and I'm at practice all day and games, I'm like, that house is probably flipped upside down 2 times before I made it home. And now it's clean when I walk into the door, and my food is ready for me to eat. And it's like, I don't know how she does it. So once again, thank you all for what you do.
Oh, keep her, because I don't have all that done.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about your initial thoughts of when you obviously knew, and Misha, you kind of mentioned it already, because you knew that you were always going to marry a coach. But what were your thoughts going into that dynamic and that relationship, and then that marriage of, I'm going to be married to a coach, versus maybe what you think now? And if it's the same, say it. But if it's a little bit different, just kind of share a little bit about where your mindset was then and where your mindset is now.
I'll let you go
first, Crystal.
Okay. So I don't think I had any, and maybe this is probably just my personality. I don't think I had any preconceived ideas of anything about marriage. I was never the person who dated people seriously through high school or college. I met Robert, like I said, I went into the gym. I think it was a January game, because I came in early from the Christmas holiday, and I had to referee a game. So I came early, and I walked into the gym. And keep in mind, I met Robert in October the year before, and he had given me his number at some club in Nacogdoches, and I didn't call him. So I didn't even, I didn't think much about it, but I was 20, I think, at the time. And so I walk into the gym, and I was like, oh crap, that's that coach that gave me his number that I didn't call. But he's pretty cute, so I should have called him. So I asked for his number again. And the joke is that when he did give me the number the original time, and this is back in 2003, he gave me his office number with the extension. Cell phone service was a little bit questionable in Nacogdoches, so he gave me his cell phone number, and he gave me his apartment number. And so, he gave me 3 phone numbers, and I lost them all, but I asked for his number again, and literally the next day we had our first date before Saturday practice and before I drove back to Houston at Whataburger. So we had our little taquitos. So I didn't think much about it, but after that I was like, this is cool. I obviously enjoyed basketball and enjoyed going to his games and supporting him. It's a busy life. I didn't have that. My sister is married to a football coach, so I knew, but unlike Misha, I didn't grow up with it every day in my childhood. So, but now I honestly, if he does ever question basketball coaching, I'm like, but I'm married to a coach. I have my highs and lows. I feel like I get my crazy out during basketball season, where I can be as loud as I want in the gym. And I tell my son that, he's 18 months now, but when he was he was 6 months and we're in the gym, I'm like, Bo, you can yell. It's okay. We can be as loud as we want in the gym. But when I go back to my design firm, it's literally 2 different lives, which is fine. But yeah, I didn't have any preconceived notion of what it was going to be like, but now I wouldn't change it. I can't imagine being married to somebody who gets home at 5 o'clock. at the same time I do. I need I need my time too. So I love it.
Well, a little side note here. You know, we all have dreams and goals personally, right? We all have like these bucket list items. And one thing that I would love to do in my life is to write a book. So when I hear you talk about, Crystal, what you do from the gym to your job, here's the book title for you. You ready for this?
Yes.
From Heels to Hoops.
Heels to Hoops. I like it.
Because that will be, you can include everything and everything in between. So that's what I'm hearing you say right now.
I love it. I love it. I couldn't, I was actually being interviewed to do a podcast and they were saying that whole connected life, your life. So now adding the mom into that, I'm learning, Misha, like how to navigate picking Bo up. What is he going to eat? He was so young before, so it was okay to keep him out late, at the games.
Yeah.
But now when he does start to get to school and like, when do I pack a lunch? Do we go to the games? How are we going to balance that? So I don't know yet. And I don't know, I guess everybody kind of does it how they feel at the time they feel. But I'm sure Misha and I'll have lots of conversations.
Yeah. I'll give you a checklist.
Yeah.
I got it. Separate bag.
Yes.
Just be glad it's a boy and not a girl. So you don't have to pack a whole outfit and bows and you're doing hair on the side of the road and yeah. Trust me.
I love it.
All right. So Misha, what about you? What was your mindset like, before marrying a coach, right? And your mindset now, is it still the same or has things evolved and changed?
No, it's still the same. It was a running joke growing up because even though my mom would not have traded the world from being a coach's wife, my parents were married 30 years and got a divorce. And I have an amazing stepmother who is like my mother as well. And she was just the same. But I used to always say growing up that, because I'm the little girl by 10 years, I have an older sister as well. And it was just known to me that my entire life, my life was based around sports and, just Judson, it's a whole different dynamic that just being a part of that in itself and that dynasty. And I grew up, of course, Judson around the 80s and 90s when, the Rutledge and Rackley, those were all my second dads. And I used to always tell my mother growing up that I'm going to marry a coach. And once I got older and older, she was like, I thought I taught you better than that. Like, they don't make that much and they're never home. What are you thinking? And it was always, I'm an extremely strong-willed person, as you know. I told her, I don't care. I'm going to marry a coach. I just know I'm going to. And so I went through school. I went through later in life, like Crystal, I never really dated anybody and I never dated anybody that like I saw it was going to be long-term. And then, like I said, I had a list going, down to he needed to be tall. He needed to be country. He needed to be like, I just knew what would work for me. I was very in tune to myself and the type of man that I needed. And so, when I met him and obviously we had run into each other again and I was like, oh, you're a coach, really? And, so we ended up having our first date and it was like history. Like that's just where it started. We were inseparable. And like I said, I know. But it has not changed for me. I will say the one weird thing for me though was basketball coach because my dad was football and track. So I always thought football, like I didn't know per se a lot about basketball because not like Crystal, I was not a sports person. I played volleyball though, but I was a cheerleader. So I knew football. I didn't know basketball. So I thought that was a little uncharted territory for me. But nothing has changed. It's crazy because it's like, I feel like I just took a pause from like my childhood and like, I just like continued right through. Like it came so easy for me. And I get so many questions from like younger wives or newer wives ask me, how I do it. And I feel bad because I try to give them as much advice what they need to do. But in my case, it's like, it just came so natural because I didn't know any different.
Right.
Like that's just what life is. There's no, it's nothing I had to think about. I knew it's who I wanted to be with and how I wanted my life to go. And I've always told Rodney, like, this is your calling in life. So in return, it's my calling in life. And I don't believe there's any greater. I think it's the most amazing thing that he gets to mold young men in a world that is so desperate for them. So I feel like I said, if it's his calling, it's my calling.
Well, it's a great segue into my next question, because that's what my question is if you could speak to the coaches' wives out there that I'm hoping might listen to this episode, and hopefully you guys will do your parts on social media to promote yourselves too. What would you want them to know? Like what kind of advice would you give to them? And I don't care if they're brand new wives, if they're wives that have been coaches' wives for 10 years. You know, I think at any point in our lives, we can grow and we can learn from others, right? So, Misha, is there anything that you would kind of tell the coach's wife out there? What kind of piece of advice would you give them?
There's a lot. I would also say, before I start with this, it's for some people and it's not. I don't know that it's necessarily a learned behavior. It's just literally, it's one of those things that's for some people and it's not for others. My biggest thing I would tell them is do a lot of soul searching. Know who you are. You need to be secure in who you are, because you are going to spend a lot of time by yourself and you are going to wear a lot of hats you did not think you were going to wear. So knowing who you are is probably the most important thing. The second most important thing is communication, and lay it all out on the line. Your expectations, he needs to let out his expectations and the reality of the situation and his coaching and the time away from home. And I think the more you communicate about it, the more you can face it head on. So my advice would be open, be honest. Don't hide if you're, feeling insecure, if you're feeling like you're not seeing him, or you're worried about the hours that he's gone. Is he really doing this? I mean, I've heard all kinds of things. And I tell the younger coaches that come in, they're like, how do you do it? Can my wife call you? Absolutely. I'm an open door. Call me. But really knowing who you are and being okay with who you are and being able to be alone with yourself is probably the number one thing that I would tell them before communication, is really be secure with yourself.
That's very good. I like it. Powerful. Crystal, what about you?
Yeah, I'm gonna chime in on the communication and really just knowing yourself. I think knowing yourself and being okay with doing your own thing. I've definitely gone to weddings by myself or taken a friend, and if somebody asks where my husband is, he might be he's probably at the gym or has practice. And I think that's okay. And I'm okay with it. I think knowing the holidays, I think that's where the communication comes in, knowing the practice schedule and the game schedule, tournaments. So I am a kind of a planner by nature, but as in you plan life and then life happens kind of situation. But if like you said, Tuesday, Fridays, we know we have games, we know we have tournaments these times of year, and knowing when the holiday practices are. So I will say that our first year of marriage, having a tournament on Thanksgiving Day, I was surprised. I knew that it was going to be around Thanksgiving, but I didn't know it was going to be like Thursday evening. You need to be in, I think we were in the Frost, some Georgetown tournament. And then now, now that I know those kind of things, I kind of like chime in, maybe you should not go to that tournament. Maybe there should be some other.
Now you have an opinion.
Exactly. So I kind of get my opinions in when I know in the spring he's starting to make his schedule. So those are things I didn't even think about. You just know, I mean, I played sports, but I didn't even think about the coaches like trying to figure out their schedules and who they're going to play against before. But I've always, again, I consider myself a new mom. Bo's only 18 months. So I always had my career. That was my baby besides, the players. And so I have been very involved in my career and, are my professional organizations and things like that, and kind of a leader in that. And so I feel like I had my own life like I said, I have the heels to hoops, so I would come in from an event or go to an event right after going to the game. So I feel like I never really lost myself in just basketball, which I think could happen easily could happen. But I think but I still love it. So again, it's my outlet. I love going to the games. I've never felt like it was a burden. It's something I enjoy. But I guess what Misha mentioned too, it's not for everybody. I think it's your own like personality too. But that would be the advice, is scheduling, just planning and knowing the schedule, and then communicating, and then having your own thing. When we moved to Austin, Robert volunteered up at UT, and we had one of Robert's old players from Nacogdoches who was like our little brother. I was in his wedding. It's Damian James. And I asked Coach Barnes, his wife, Candy, I was like, what's your advice? And that was her advice she gave me, is to have your own thing. And think about how, we're married to high school coaches. Think about how long a basketball season is in college and how much they're away. And actually like on a plane away. So, having your own thing, I think is a big thing too.
I think it's so important for that communication piece, because whether we're coaches or not, I mean, in any relationship, in any marriage, other than building your foundation on faith, right? You've got to have that open communication. And sometimes you're going to hear some things that you don't want to really listen to. But what I always say is that don't always listen to my tone, listen to the message, because I'm going to screw up the tone. Like, I just know that I'm a coach, I'm a man, like I haven't figured that out yet. So get past my tone, because I don't really mean it. It just comes out that way. But my message, like, we need to talk this out. We need to iron this out and communicate, because it's not easy. It's not easy. It's not being a coach as well as a coach's wife. It's difficult, and it has its trials and tribulations for not just those invested. Like, it's not just a spouse thing. It's now you're talking about kids, your own kids, right? But then professionally, if I'm being pulled away as a coach to stay home more, well, then my athletes are going to, suffer from that too. So it's a balance. But you're right. If that communication piece is not there, then both sides of the table are probably going to struggle a little bit.
Well, sometimes Robert I think I might step over the line in communication, and I asked him, why didn't you call that timeout? Or why didn't you run a certain play? And I don't think he ever wants to hear that too much.
So that was actually going to be one of the questions I asked. So since you said it, I'll go there, right? So, like, I'm curious to know if Rodney or Robert, if they ever reach out to you and ask you, like, what were your thoughts on the game? Do they ever ask you for your input or opinions?
Yeah, I get asked a lot. And honestly, like, I, again, played through high school and did intramurals. Robert will walk through a whole explanation of a play and tell me about some kind of screen and all this. Like, I know basic and I can run and do stuff, but if they're not hustling or rebounding, I let him know, and he knows it. And then of course he'll throw out there, well, we out rebound them by 15 rebounds. But I go, the eye test, it didn't look like they were hustling. It didn't look. So I definitely, sometimes I have to hold back, because I probably go in on him or the guys, or why weren't they doing this? Or did you see them talking on the bench? Why were they laughing? So I'm probably a little tough on that whole situation. But Bo, last season I was all over the place, so I didn't focus in as much. So maybe that's better.
Yeah, you and my wife both, because when she does come to the game, like, I'll see her, I'll hug her, I'll give her a kiss, I'll kiss my kids, and then I look back again, she's gone, but my mother-in-law's in the stands because she's in the hallways chasing the kids. So yeah, exactly. Misha, what about you?
Okay, so I'm gonna put just a disclaimer out there. This is solely my relationship. It's not for everybody. I know who I'm married to, so no. I learned this just knowing him, that I do not tell him how to do his job. Now, has there been moments? Yes, where I've said probably things I shouldn't have, but I don't. We tell each other everything. So he will come home, but I've just learned for him that I'm a sounding board. So just let him talk, let him tell me. And it's something that we struggled, even with, our family lives, our personal lives. My brother-in-law, for instance, my sister's husband, coached. He played professionally in the NFL for a while and then coached. And for a while, he was Rodney's assistant basketball coach. And I use this as an example. They have a completely different dynamic of a marriage. My sister can, tell him, well, you should try this and do this and this. Now, on the left hand, me and Rodney, what works for us is just different. I don't know enough I know enough of basketball, of course, now, but the way he chooses to run his program, I have so much faith in him, and this is not in comparison to anybody else, but just in him that I'm a sounding board. You tell me whatever you want to tell. I will give my opinion somehow, but I will never oh, you should have run. I give you all the props in the world, Crystal.
I'm laughing because I'm sure Robert wishes I was a little.
No, I want to. And I'm a vocal person. There'll be some times that I will say it. The only thing that Rodney would probably say that I do say a lot is that I baby them. Because they're all like my kids. And I get way, way, way attached. So that's probably one thing that I do tell him a lot is, well, did you really have to and he's like, yes, Nisha, yes. So that would probably be one thing that I would say that I do, but never plays or anything like that. No.
Well, I think anybody that knows you and that knows Rodney, I think 99.9% of the people would have known that's how you would have answered that question. So
yeah.
But you know what? Part of that is, and you said it, the simplicity of knowing your husband. Right? Because Crystal, you can talk about yours. Well, that's because that's his personality, right? Rodney's got his personality. I have my own personality. My wife doesn't know a lot about basketball, but I tell you what, if I get home and she wants to have a conversation with me about basketball, I'm going to stop and listen because she doesn't really know the game. She doesn't really know the X's and O's. So when her eye test is saying, Michael, your kids didn't do X, Y, and Z, that's what I'm going to go back and watch because she doesn't speak up all the time. So when she does her eye test, I'm going to listen to it. And I'll go back the very next day in practice and say, listen, my wife, she doesn't really know basketball, but this is what she said about y'all last night. This is what we need to fix. And I think it's so important because it's very helpful. Number one, and Misha, this kind of goes back to you, that when you are that team mom for those kids, I want to remind you, you're modeling a wife's behavior with a husband, with a team. You're modeling support of your husband. And in a place where not all kids, I grew up in a divorced family, right? I didn't have my dad around, so I'm growing up like that. Our kids are growing up like that, or they might be, but you're modeling a behavior that teenage boys are learning what they should be looking for in a spouse. So those I always call it ATM. Always teachable moments in everything that you do. And again, that goes back to being you. So don't apologize for being you. Continue to be that team mom for those kids.
I love it.
It's halftime.
Thank you for listening to Coach Mike on the Mic. Let's Talk Hoops. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure you subscribe and click the notification button and then share it with your friends. If you're so inclined to do so, would you please rate and review this podcast so that I can help grow this community of listeners? I hope there was something that you heard today that entertained you or connected you to the game of basketball. If you'd like to be a guest or know someone who would be a great guest on the show, please comment below or reach out to me on any of my social media platforms. Until the next time we meet, the ball is now in your court. Be someone's champion today.